Join me in the audio garden to cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. My name is Martha Senator. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard. I'm so happy to be here with you, my friends, in this special place and hour when we get to greet you in the audio garden. Tony Robles and I have brought in a plentiful harvest this week. From San Francisco, we will hear from authors participating in the 7th Annual Filipino American International Book Festival. Last week, we shared a conversation Tony had with the keynote speaker at that event, Ninachka Rosca. Today, Tony speaks with Respicio, the people behind Hot Tropics Marketplace, Cleodia Martinez, Chef Claude, Marivi, Soliven, and Randy Gonzalez. Later in the hour, we will hear more about how writers, publishers, and bookstores are coping with the closure of small press distribution with our guests Diane Goettel, Eileen Tabios, Kate McMullen, and Annie Groover. But let's start with the poem. This is Why Do They Fear Us? Featuring Yolanda Lear from the Broken Record album The Architecture of Oppression, Volume 2.
Why do you fear us? Is it the darkest shades of our skin, or the way our hair flows in the wind? Tell me, is it danger we bring? Or is it cause my sisters were queens and my brothers kings, so in our blood be royalty? Or do you fear us? Fear us because my people holds the knowledge that you don't understand, and you're afraid that one day we might raise a revolution, or are you scared? Scared because my people can create leaders, even though most of our life we are taught to follow. I still do not understand why your love for us can be so narrow. I see the fear in your eyes, but why? Why do you fear us? Is it because of my people's ability to rise each time you try to break us in our stride? Got me asking, what is the difference between you and I? I mean, you strip us of our colors, we're both alike, right? So, why? Why do you fear us? Is it because we don't flinch when you're near us, regardless of our history? Or because of our history you think we switch eventually? Or is it because we can switch from Martin to Malcolm in a split second and you won't even see it coming? Is that why you fear us? Or is it because we show love when you show hate, and that leaves you in a confused mind state now? I ask you why? Why do you fear us? Is it the darker shades of our skin, or the way our hair flows in the wind? Tell me, is it the danger we bring, or is it because you know without us your empire will sin?
We've been listening to Why Do They Fear Us, featuring Yolanda Lear from the Broken Record album The Architecture of Oppression, Volume 2. My name is Martha Senator, and this is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. Filipino American writers represent many genres, from children's books to cookbooks, poetry, novels, memoirs, essay collections, and more, I'm sure. Tony Robles' latest book, Thrift Store Metamorphosis, was on a table at the 7th Annual Filipino American International Book Festival, which took place in San Francisco recently. And, of course, our people's poet spoke to lots of fellow authors who join us now here in the audio garden.
Hi, this is Tony Robles, and this is Listen and Be Heard Radio. This is the 7th Annual Filipino American International Book Festival in San Francisco. And, we have the esteemed author, May Respicio, with us. She's a young adult author. May, thank you for being with us. And, you've written many, many books. Tell us about your books and tell us about the festival and how things are going.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me. So the festival feels like family. It feels like home. I get here, I see so many friends, and I'm so inspired to be surrounded by all of these Filipino words and books and people and food. Yeah. So I'm very grateful to be here that they're still putting this on. And then as far as my books, I write books for kids that draw from my heritage growing up Filipino American. Yeah. I grew up as a kid in the 80s, never saw a single book with any Filipino character, not even the most minor one. And, that's all I did. I was not a sports kid. I was a kid with my head in a book all the time, yet never saw any of those mirrors. And so that's part of why I write what I write. So strong, creative Filipino American kids and their families just going through their everyday kid things. So, everyday stories, but they have Filipino characters. So
much of what we do is kind of fueled by, encouragement. What kind of encouragement did you have? Was it from relatives? Was it from teachers?
My mom was an elementary school teacher. I grew up here in Northern California, and she was the first person who really instilled the love of books in me. And even though the majority of my family, they work as nurses and doctors and medicine, I was sort of the black sheep in that sense, I wanted to study poetry. I wanted to do things with words, but I had support from my parents. And so that was a really special thing to me growing up. To really have their blessing to be able to do what I felt like I wanted to do. And, there's some of that push and pull, of course. It's never too late to go to nursing school. I heard that a lot, but for the most part, I feel very, very fortunate to have a good foundation for my writing and my stories.
One of the titles that always kind of pops out at me is one of your books. It's called How to Win a Slime War. Tell us, what the inspiration was for How to Win a Slime War.
So How to Win a Slime War, it's all about a kid named Alex Manalo. He's 12 and he's a Slimer. And that was totally inspired by my boys. And my kids they're teenagers now, they're in high school, but they had a huge slime period. And it was just fun to watch them and their joy, and that's part of what I want to do for kids, is give them joyful books. Kids just doing their everyday things, playing with slime, but they happen to be Filipino. And so that was born from my kids' sliming era. So there's recipes. We tested out all the recipes. I did a lot of cleaning of goo from my couch and from the kitchen, but that's where that story comes from. And it's set in a Filipino market. It's the story, there's deeper themes to it. So it's about a kid who loves slime, but there's this dad who wants him to do other things, and so it's about him sort of understanding his own passions and finding his own voice.
I think you read an excerpt, I think it was yesterday, from the book, and there was poetry, right? There was some poetry. Can you talk about those excerpts?
It's called Isabel in Bloom, all about a 12-year-old girl who's reunited with her mom, who is an overseas Filipino worker.
Could you repeat the name again?
Isabel in Bloom.
Isabel in Bloom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it takes place in 1999 San Francisco.
That's right. Yeah.
When Isabel is reunited with her mom, and she's 12. She hates it there. She doesn't know anything. She doesn't know the culture. She's lost, and she finds this garden, an old community garden. That's right. This garden is what helps her begin to understand what home is. So it's a story very close to my heart, one I haven't seen in any books for kids or middle grade novels. So it's in poetry, and it's all about her journey of understanding what home is, and her literal journey of moving countries and adjusting. And her
mother's an overseas worker, right?
Yeah.
Or an OFW?
Yeah. So
overseas Filipino worker?
Yeah, OFW who came to the United States to work as a caretaker, a nanny. She didn't see her daughter often growing up, and then suddenly her daughter is told that, yeah, you're going to go live in California now and be with your mom. And so that's a huge change for any kid, but especially for that character.
Yeah. Again, May, really just big ups on your success, and just being as prolific as you have been. For people that want to know more about your work and get your books, who have not made it to the book festival here, if they want to do that, how would they go about it?
Oh, I appreciate that, Tony. Thank you. So I love supporting independent bookstores, especially bookstores that are run and owned by Filipinas. So there's Philippine Expressions Bookshop in Southern California. Yeah, with Linda and Yetes. You can order my books there online. There is also,
Archipelago?
Oh, Archipelago Books
yeah.
Here in the city, here in San Francisco. There's East Wind Books in
Books in Berkeley. I think they're online seller now, right?
Yeah, they sell online. So I highly encourage any independent bookstore. And what's the one in Long Beach? Belcanto Books.
Belcanto, okay.
Then they are in Long Beach. They also have my books online, Filipino owned. They are all wonderful bookstores. Support them whenever you can.
And one last thing, we have so many Filipino authors, Filipino American authors from the diaspora that are all gathered here under one roof. How do you feel about that? How does it make you feel? I mean, does it feel like family, or what? Just.
It does. It feels like family. We're just kind of missing a karaoke machine, but it feels like family. It feels inspiring. It inspires me, and it gives me hope. It makes me want to keep going. It makes me see how powerful our stories are, and that we need more of our stories. So if any of you listening are writers, creators, illustrators, keep doing your thing, because we need your stories too. And so that's really what I get out of a festival like this. Is it feels good. It feels like hope.
All right.
Yeah.
Again, May Respicio, author, here at the 7th Annual Filipino American International Book Festival. Again, this is Tony Robles, and this is Listen and Be Heard for readers and writers. We're talking to Rexy of Hot Tropics Comics, graphic novels, and kids lit from the Philippines. Rexy, thanks for taking time. Tell us about Hot Tropics.
Yeah, so we started, or Angelo over here, actually.
I wanted to know just something about Hot Tropics.
So we started technically in February of this year, and we sell comics and kids, basically Filipino books from the Philippines with pictures. Yeah, that's our jam.
We lived in the Philippines. We got into the comic scene in the Philippines. So we made like an anthology. I have a title called Maharlika, which is a Filipino sci-fi kind of manga. And we just got into the community and realized that we needed, when we were making comics in the Philippines, we wished we had a partner in the U.S. that could help bring it to the Filipino American market. And then Angelo moved back to the U.S. About midway through last year and decided to just kind of start, we brought a first shipment over, started to get some traction, and people were excited to see these stories from the Philippines, and so we just started kind of growing it from there.
Well, tell us about who your readers are.
It's a pretty big mix. So we have I would say some of the big segments are so Filipino moms and dads who were look for the children's books, so the kind of children's book section. A lot of people who kind of grew up, actually a lot that they either grew up in the Philippines and want to reconnect, or they actually grew up not knowing anything about their Filipino culture and they don't want their kids to have the same experience.
Yeah.
So that's one segment. The other segment is people who are, they like comics, graphic novels, manga, but haven't really experienced it, the Filipino kind of stories in those formats, and they're excited to see that. And then there's also just people who are like diehard. They collect Filipino comics. They have the early editions of Trece, and then we're the first to bring it to America.
What's really like the crazy customer bases that I've been finding is like in the institutions. It's like it's really cool to see like non-Filipinos that are really up on Filipino work.
Yeah.
It's like one of my first things was like some art university in Minneapolis. Yeah, they were like I was like, why am I ordering a bunch of stuff to Minnesota? And I looked it up. It was like a professor. They didn't look Filipino at all, but it's just really cool to see like non-Filipinos kind of embrace Filipino media. It's really awesome.
Well, it looks like looking at some of the books you have After Lambanda, Myth and Magic in Manila. You have Maria Rosa, Freedom Fighter, Scientist and Inventor. So it looks like you have kind of a social consciousness as well. You're kind of bridging the message with the entertainment and storytelling. If you could just tell us which one is your latest book that's out right now?
The biggest one, we're sold out, but I think Sawala is like one of our bestsellers. It's written by Ren Galleno. She published a story in Washington Post, and she was nominated for a Pulitzer. Yeah. And she's a Pinay author from the Philippines. Yeah. We have Looney, who wrote Knights of the Wandering Castle.
Knights of the Wandering Castle.
Yeah, amazing guy. Just an amazing fan base. It's probably the best-selling Filipino comic in America.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And again, it's called Knights of the Wandering Castle.
Yeah.
Wow, by Looney, right? Yeah. Luny. Okay.
Yeah, and then this up-and-coming guy, NP Alfaro, a.k.a. Josh, him and Borg. So this was a Filipino American writer with a Filipino artist and an international team of there's a Mexican dude, but basically they made this comic book about an aswang. It's called Contra Against Evil. Okay. Be on the lookout. He's actually in the Philippines promoting this right now, so it's one of those things where it's like the diaspora worked on this book together.
So it's NP Alfaro.
Yeah.
Contra Against Evil.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Again, this is Hot Tropics. Comics and graphic novels and kids literature from the Philippines. If people want to learn more about you or perhaps order some of your work, how can they go ahead and do that?
Go to Hot Tropics with a K, HOTTROPIKS.com. And because we're from the Philippines, so we spell everything with a K like our comics. Mm-hmm. It's just our identity and we're claiming it. And then go to hot.tropics on IG and Insta is IG, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're speaking with Cleodia Martinez, the author of a wonderful new book that deals with food. It's called S2e33. Thank you for taking time, Cleodia. Tell us about your book.
Okay, so my book is called S2e33, Whole Food Plant-Based Filipino Cuisine. S2e stands for Sustancia, which is the Filipino food for nutrition. So this showcases 80 recipes or whole food plant-based Filipino food for those who are trying to improve their health also just enjoy more plant-based Filipino food.
Part of the title is global, correct? Global. Can you talk more about that for people who don't know? Because, we have, our people in the diaspora and our food is in the diaspora and your book is focused on health. Can you maybe talk a bit about that?
Yes. So in the Filipino American community alone, I noticed that the health issues are pretty common. It's usually high cholesterol, high blood sugar. Yeah. And so this is true also with the diaspora. I wrote their global Filipino cuisine in recognition of the different influences that there is in Filipino food. I mean, at this time, it's really hard to remove those, right? Like the whole question of what is Filipino gets floated around. But for me, I just wanted to recognize that and then go from there, because our food is very rich, and it's made rich because of our history. And with a global title as well, I wanted it to reach people across the globe, Filipinos across the globe, and I wanted the recipes to be able to be something that they can cook no matter where they are, because vegetables are everywhere. So in the cookbook, you're able to substitute what's in season no matter where you're at, because the framework of Filipino cooking and the flavors, I feel like, is the same. So it's a lot of garlic, ginger, toyo, vinegar, right? Yeah. So those things you can find almost anywhere in the world, and then you use the vegetables local to you to make a Filipino dish. So I really wanted it to be very, very simple and something that people can springboard from. And like I said in the panel, like create their own family cookbook as a result.
How many recipes are in the book?
There's over 80 recipes, ranging from sauces like a sea sauce, like a patis, vegan, up to entrees like the sisig, sinigang, caldereta. They're all there.
You know what I'm really interested in is, you'd mentioned in the presentation that you were able to lower your cholesterol, which, I'm on medication for that and high blood pressure. And it just seems like everybody is on some kind of medication. What advice would you give to people who are dealing with that particularly want to get off the medication?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a very powerful way to address any health issues such as high cholesterol or high blood sugar. The basic point of it is you need to increase the fiber in your diet, because, for example, with cholesterol, we know that it's blockages in our blood vessels. Okay. So the role of whole food plant-based foods in that is it takes it like a broom and sweeps off those blockages. That's what the fiber does, both soluble and insoluble fibers. And those are found in whole food plant-based food. Whole because the fiber is intact. That is the key. That's why things like highly processed meats or meat substitutes don't really apply to this kind of approach. It's because the fiber, while it's there on the label, it's no longer really intact. So if we learn to consume whole food plant-based foods in the way that we enjoy, because we know food is a big part of it, but it's not all of it. There's your thoughts, your beliefs, your mental support, your lifestyle, how much sleep you get, how much exercise you have. But for the food puzzle, I would say like really focusing on whole food so that you get the fiber to help your body flush out all of those things that are stuck in your body. It depends where you are too, in terms of where to start, because some people like me did not like vegetables at all. So I was basically from zero. I really had to train myself. So it felt like rebalancing my palate. I really had to go far beyond the other way of meat to be able to do that. But if you're someone who already eats vegetables, then it'll be a little bit easier, because then you're not dealing with such a big adjustment. But to start, I guess generally anyone can do with increasing the portion of whole food plants in their plate for every meal. That would alone help. And also increasing your bean consumption. Bean? Munggo, for example. Yeah, bean. I have a recipe in the book for munggo, and I also have one for breakfast beans, which I highly recommend. It's kind of like the pork and beans that we have in the Philippines, but it's a whole food plant-based version, and so good. So that's something that I would highly recommend. I'm definitely going to have to get the book, because it just seems, healthy and practical, and, back to our culture. But before we close the interview, and again, thank you for taking time, Claudia. Filipino Book Festival, International Book Festival, 7th annual. What's been your experience? Have there been any surprises? Yeah, how does it feel to come, together with community, with
Filipino writers from the diaspora from all over the place in one under one roof.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here, and this is nourishing for me, for the heart and for the mind. So it's been an awesome experience. I'm so proud to be in that panel and be included, and so thankful for the organizers of the Phil Book Festival.
All right. Again, this is Cleodia Martinez. Again, the name of your book and how we can get it if we're not at the book festival right now.
My cookbook is Isos, Whole Food Plant-Based Global Filipino Cuisine. You may get it online, Amazon, or my website, ClaudiaMartinez.com.
ClaudiaMartinez.com. Thank you so much, Claudia. This has been a wonderful, wonderful event. And again, this is Tony Robles for Listen and Be Heard Radio for readers and writers.
Thank you, Tony Robles, for all those conversations with authors participating in the 7th Annual Filipino American International Book Festival in San Francisco. And we will hear from a few more authors after a little break. I'm going to go check on the baby goats, and I'll meet you on the other side of the bridge. And in the meantime, here are some comments from LA Unified School District Board President Jackie Goldberg on banning books in schools.
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Once it's heard, it can't be unheard. Once it's published, it's not going to be unpublished. Once you read the poem, you can't unread it. No matter how an individual may try to push it to the side, forget about it, it's still in there. And it's the words, the meaning, the feelings behind it are taking root in their psyche, and they can't get rid of it.
This book is gay. By Juno Dawson.
Here's what really scares me. When you have 2 or 3 days of this kind of chaos, of people screaming at the top of their lungs outside a school that read a book with one sentence in it that said, yeah, guess what? Families can include 2 moms and 2 dads. By the way, at the little discussion at the school after that, as soon as the book was over, one of the little girls sitting at my knees said, I have 2 mommies. But a little boy on my other side said, I have 5 grandmas. The idea that there are different kinds of families. The people screaming out at the streets, they didn't get a chance to find out about that because they made a decision based on hearsay. They made a decision based on agitators, not from their community, but from outside their community who saw an opportunity to take advantage of the real fears of people. We don't all have to agree. In fact, none of us all agree. But we are going to stand up and say to people shouting outside of a school and to the media that when you broadcast this in the way that you did, you frightened LGBTQ kids and adults in every school in this district and in this city. And we must take much more care about how we elevate an assembly reading a book with one line. Fear is not our friend. Love is. That was the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm Jewish, and I still say it. Love one another as you would be loved. I think that's the rule we should have for absolutely everybody. But if you can't love me, at least don't bug me.
This is Listen and Be Heard Radio, WLBH.org. We're right in the middle of the Listen and Be Heard hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator, and coming up in just a little while, we'll amble down the path to part 2 of our roundtable discussion about the closure of small press distribution. But first, we're going to go back to Tony Robles to hear a little more from the Filipino American International Book Festival that took place in San Francisco.
We're speaking with author Marivi Soliven. Marivi, how are you?
I'm overwhelmed. I actually had someone come up to me who said that she had my very first published book, The Unicorn, which was published, I want to say, in 1991. Mm-hmm. And literally that book has been out of print for at least 20 years. And for someone to come up to you and say, I still have it, and then it's shocking. And then another woman came up to me and she said, I have one of your children's books called Philippine Fright, and my middle schoolers are still reading it. Another out-of-print book. And so it was such a gift to hear these people come up and say, your books are out of print, but they are not forgotten. We're still reading them. It's
that's a real compliment. It means so much to a writer. So you're the author of The Mango Bride, part of which took place in San Francisco and the other part took place in Manila. I understand that there was a movie option for that?
Yes, that is still in the works. We're in the casting part of the production process now, and I'm hopeful that we will finally begin filming next year.
How is that? Because you have, the book and then the adaptation to a screenplay. What's the process of that like? Because I guess you have to work with a screenwriter, correct?
Yes, but I trust the screenwriter. I've seen that person's work. I think one of the script doctors worked on the original screenplay of Ang Pagdadalaga ni Maximo Oliveros, which was the first Filipino film to win an award at the Sundance Film Festival so many years ago. So I trust that person intimately, and the director also, I've seen her work. She is the niece of Raymond Red. Her name is Ray Red, and hopefully if she can helm the production, all will go well. And essentially, The Mango Bride is part my love letter to the University of the Philippines in Diliman, as well as my love letter to the Bay Area, which I consider my first home in the United States.
Now, you live in San Diego, is that correct?
Yes, I do. It's another universe.
Another universe. There are a lot of young people here, but there are a lot of people of many ages. If there's any advice that you could give somebody that, maybe wants to express themselves in writing, what advice would you give them?
Just write it all down. Write everything down, no matter how bad or good or cheesy or corny you think it is, because one day you will read that and say, there is a germ of a story here. And if you have the wherewithal and the inclination to do it, then maybe you'll write a better story around the germ of the idea. And if you don't, it'll still be a good memoir. It'll still be a good relic of those days when you're being cheesy or corny or whatever. Yeah. Every experience counts.
That's right. And Marivi, for folks that want to purchase your work or learn more about you, do you have a website, or how could they go about doing that?
You can find me on marivisoliven.com. You can get both The Mango Bride and Spooky Mo on digital editions in Amazon, on Kindle. And just keep abreast of what's going on with the Mango Bride movie. I also have another movie that came out based on my day job interpreting for end-of-life calls at the height of COVID. And it was called Pandemic Bread. It's done the rounds of film festivals from both the East to the West Coast. And hopefully I will be able to show it at universities or in the Philippines someday.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm here with Randy Gonzalez, who is one of the visiting authors. Randy, I know you've been on a couple of panels. Well, first of all, good to see you. And how are things going at the festival for you?
Oh, everything's going great. Having a good time in San Francisco. I understand that I get the sense, though, that I'm not in Louisiana anymore. This isn't the Bayou, right? And I'm not on the so just the amount of Filipinos in the crowd and the audience. And so it's just a whole different, it's a whole different world.
What's been the, I guess, what's been the reaction to settling St. Malo? I know there's been a lot of reclamation, people who didn't know about that Filipino settlement in Louisiana. What's been the, the reaction to that by Filipinos here on the West Coast?
It's kind of, I think, a hit or miss, because I think people who are interested have kind of already reached out to Louisiana and gone there and seen, and so I think there is a sense of people who are here in a community and grew up in a different space, and they're looking for something maybe to reflect their stories and then their experiences, and my story is not the same, right? Mm-hmm. So I've often, I've actually met people from outside of California that are here at the festival who are kind of like, and come say, this is interesting because this is my experience in the Midwest, or this is my experience in Canada. Yeah. But for people who are growing up, say, in San Francisco, it's a different experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about a kind of Filipino American world that's not as familiar to them.
Now, Settling St. Malo is a book, a history of Filipinos in Louisiana. Can you tell people who are interested in getting this book how they can go about doing?
Yeah, you can get the book. It's available on Amazon, but you can also get it at the press, which is UL Press. It's the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. And so the press, has done a good job for me with the book. They allowed me a lot of freedom to make a book that's poetry, documentary, but also hybrid in the sense it has photos, it has letters, people have described the book as an archive of the archive of Filipino Louisiana.
Fantastic. Randy Gonzalez, thank you so much. We have the ultimate Filipino adobo book, Stories and Recipes from the Heart, Chef Claude Tayag. Chef Tayag, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. Tell us about your book, The Ultimate Adobo.
Well, the book basically tells you about, it's not a cookbook per se, but it has some recipes on adobo, different kinds of adobo, and it's about the stories, the narratives on what adobo means to a lot of Filipinos globally, means to them. Mm-hmm. And I say, I underline the word Filipino adobo, because to differentiate it from the Spanish adobo, or where we may have borrowed the term from, or even the Mexican adobo. Whereas the Filipino adobo is a cooking method using vinegar as the primary source of liquid. And then variable aromatics, meaning it could be garlic, onion, turmeric, the bay leaf, of course, and then black peppercorn. Some would use achiote, the anato, and then the orgata, the coconut milk. So it's really an endless interpretation of what the Filipino adobo is.
Mm-hmm. What made you get into cooking? Were you inspired by like a Lola or a Lolo, or what was the start of that?
Okay, the start of my cooking. It's like, I'm from Pampanga. Mm-hmm. It's just like saying it's in our DNA, like cooking, it's a birthright. And eating good food at that. The thing was there was constant cooking by our mother. And as little children, in the second batch, we were made to help out in the kitchen. So I would say that is my most formal training. So literally, later on in life, being an artist, I love improvisation, like what is left over, especially for dinner. If it's a repeat from lunch, which I hated, I would do something out of it, like if nilagang manok, I'm familiar with the boiled chicken dinner. I get chicken bits and all that, and then make chicken sandwich out of it, or maybe do a pancit canton from the chicken, the broth, and then the vegetables. So I was like that. I kept on improvising, like what is available, and growing up, it's like realizing that is what Filipino cooking is. The food, the cooked dish, depends on the maker, on what is available, on like what the preference, and there is room for interpretation. It's not, we don't have any codified recipes. So that is Philippine cuisine.
I want to ask you, are you a chef that is a poet, or are you a poet that happens to be a chef?
I'm all of it. I am all my passions put together. The art, the painting, the cooking, the eating. First and foremost, the eating. And the environment I grew up in, meaning in a large family, in Pampanga, considered as the culinary capital of the Philippines. I mean, basically, you can say I was born with not only a wooden spoon. So that's how it is. It's like,
fantastic.
Don't call me chef, just call me cocinero.
Cocinero, Cocinero Claude, Tayag, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
The ultimate Filipino adobo. Again, this is Tony Robles from the 7th Annual Filipino American International Book Festival in San Francisco. And this is Listen and Be Heard for readers and writers.
Thank you to Tony Robles for being such a busy bee in the literary garden and speaking to so many authors at an event that brought them all together in one place to appreciate where they've been and talk about where they're going, and of course to share many, many books. While he was talking, I welcomed back to the garden Eileen Tabios, Diane Goettel, Kate McMullen, and Annie Groover for part 2 of our 3-part discussion of the closure of Small Press Distribution, a company that provided distribution and had been relied on by more than 300 small presses around the country, which is how they were getting into bookstores and universities. We spoke about the unfolding drama back in April of 2024, which left publishers and writers scrambling to keep their books in print. I'm hearing a unanimous, it made things harder, and that SPD was really unique in the landscape. I guess partially because of its willingness to just include even the smallest of presses in their distribution. And by gathering more than 300, I imagine that's how they were able to do that for those 55 years. How are you actually dealing with that now? Have you made the time maybe to do some of these distribution tasks that SPD was taking on? Diane?
So, what we did in the interim is essentially, went went on our knees and said to everybody, please allow us to serve as our own distributor for this short period of time. And that sort of worked. I work out of my home. I have a room that is dedicated to just Black Lawrence Press book storage. I have over 10,000 Black Lawrence Press volumes in my house. So I knew that I could handle it in the short term. And that's basically what we had to do for 4 to 5 months as we were getting set up with a new distributor. As was mentioned earlier, moving to a new distributor is actually quite a big process. If you think about every little piece of information about a book, the ISBN, the price number, a file for the cover art, blurbs, it goes on and on. For every single book, and we have over 400 in print, each of those pieces of information has to go to the new distributor.
And I'm sorry, if I could just ask right there, how How many distributors did you actually have? What was the landscape to choose from? Because we're talking about how unique SPD was. What are the limitations of your choices without them?
Unlike smaller presses that are some of them are still trying to find new distribution, we were in the very fortunate position of simply being an older and more established press. Black Lawrence Press is celebrating its 20th year in business this year. As I mentioned, we've published over 400 books, and so we actually had distributors competing for our business. So that was one piece in this very challenging time that was quite fortunate.
Now the landscape has shrunk even more with the closure of SPD. What is it like in that environment that we then have to, as a publishing community, examine about how to survive in an independent environment?
I would say what today I'm about to be published. My next two coming books. My second novel is being published by a big five publisher, but my other new novel forthcoming is a children's book published by literally a kitchen house press, and it seems to me that it'll be very interesting for me to compare in 2025 what it's like to be distributed by the two radical extremes, a big five publisher and a community press, an indie press. But it seems to me, even when you have small presses and indie presses picked up by distributors that are bigger and one would think are financially more stable than SPD was, what actually happens, and I hope I'm not being too cynical, is that just because you're picked up by a big distributor doesn't mean that the small press is getting sufficient attention. It's because you now have the competition from all sorts of other presses. And so I think this means that looking for the future, small presses and part of the assets of small presses have always been their community networks. If you do not have a backing of a quote, some type of community, I don't see how a small press or an indie press can survive. I would say 90% plus of your support, whether it's from sales or others, are from your community. That's like inherent in what a small press or indie press is about.
And I see you nodding your head, Kate, from Hub City Publishing. Maybe you could give a little perspective. I think that you still are actually the only indie publisher in South Carolina. And I do know that you focus on Southern writers and try to represent that community. So is that ringing true to you?
Yeah, it's we're almost kind of crowdfunded. There is not a lot of grant funding, other than kind of the typical, National Endowment for the Arts, and other, regional NEA affiliates, state funding. There's just not a lot of like publishing funding around here. But I do think we've had success, kind of pushing our Southern agenda a little bit, which is really exciting. But it does mean our sales reps from PGW have to want to push the books. They like our books, which is great. But when they're going out on calls, they're a great team. They're the second largest, I think, sales force outside of Penguin Random House. So they have a really, a great like presence in the market in indie bookstores. But they have to be pushing your book if they like it that particular season. They have to pick it to pitch at Winter Institute or some of these other trade shows. And if we miss out on that, that's not something that's happening for us. So again, we still really rely on a lot of our really strong relationships with bookstores in the South. We're really lucky to have just an incredible network of bookstores, of indie bookstores down here, and more of them are opening all the time. So that's something that's nice. Is that there are a lot more places, more and more every day, like Hub City Bookshop, where you can wander in, and there's a curated, list of things that you might not otherwise find. It's really hard to replicate that if you're not as lucky as we are to have, field sales reps going out and pushing your books.
Annie, do you have a little more to add to that as like being part of a larger mission, the Hub City mission, I guess, which seems to be all literary in nature. And you actually do have a reach out arm, like a community outreach arm of what you're doing as well.
Yes, we do have an outreach. We partner with a lot of Title I schools, things like that. We we do work hand in hand with the press. Our bookshop does reflect the interests of the press. We have, a Southern literature section. We have a lot of literary fiction, and to try to balance that also with just being the bookshop where you bring your kid to get, a Dr. Seuss book, that kind of thing. So it is kind of an ecosystem. And it's a unique one to our area. If we were 50 miles up the road, we could look totally different. So, and something I was thinking of before when you were talking about, like a larger distributor subsuming, some of these smaller presses, like when I get the catalogs for PRH for each season, there's, over 1,000 books in there. No one has time to read reviews for 1,000 books, even if my only job was to come in here every day and just read reviews and place orders, so books can get lost because, they're putting the books they want at the top, that are going to be the big sellers. And of course, that's what people are going to ask for too. So trying to balance, our mission as a nonprofit with, listening to Southern voices and things and, providing what the Southern people in this town want to read as well. So, there's not one size fits all. There's not one tight, clean answer. It's a very much a living organism, and we're trying to balance, what people want, what people need, what we're trying to promote in our community, what kind of community we're building. And we very much feel like we're building a community here. So it can be tricky to know where to spend your budget. We have a finite budget, but an infinite imagination for what we would like our community to look like.
Thank you, Eileen, Tabios, Diane Goettel, Kate McMullen, and Annie Groover, for joining me, Martha Senator, here in the audio garden. They've promised to join me to walk a little further down the path next week when we'll give you the final part of our discussion of the post-SPD literary landscape. The Listen and Be Heard hour for readers and writers is recorded at Martha's Kitchen Garden in Greenville, South Carolina. Every day as I go about my chores, taking care of the goats, ducks, chickens, cat and dog, the gardens, I observe a lot of wildlife, and mostly I just observe. I watch the hawks, crows, herons, eagles, hedgehogs, and squirrels, and I hear coyotes at night. But at first, for me, a few days ago, I saw a very big skunk. Not the first skunk I've seen, but it was skulking around my baby goats, and it was charging my dog and cat, who didn't want to get in a fight with it. And this was all happening in broad daylight. What do I do about a skunk out here in broad daylight? A very bold ass skunk I don't feel like getting any closer to. What do I do? So I don't even know how to shoot a gun, and I was worried it was probably rabid. So I called my son to ask him to come shoot it, but he didn't answer his phone. And neither did James, who will often come to help me out of a bind. So I was on my own this time and had to resort to cave women tactics, which was to anticipate and use a heavy rock at the right moment. As big as Bobo is, he's a Great Pyrenees and looks like a big white wolf. He seemed grateful to me for handling the skunk. And that is the circle of death and life that plays out here every day. It still smells like skunk near the goat stalls, and I'm so protective because last week Louise gave birth to Helene in Milton, and this week it was Thelma's turn. She gave birth to Ivy, and these baby goats, they look like little stuffed toy animals. They're so small and so cute. My son John and his friends Chase and Jaimin came to chop wood on this past weekend. We've been collecting a lot of this wood that from all these fallen trees after Hurricane Helene. But they spent a lot of time just watching the babies. So you can watch them too. You could go to listenandbeheard.net to see some video of skunk and baby goats and more, as well as uncut videos of author interviews that Tony Robles and I have done over these past couple seasons of the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I have been so happy to have you join me here today, and just want to thank you. I've been your host, Martha Senator. My co-host is Tony Robles. Our guests were May Respicio, Rexy, Cleodia Martinez, Chef Claude, Marivi Soliven, Randy Gonzalez, Diane Goettel, Eileen Tabios, Kate McMullen, and Annie Groover. Our featured spoken word was Why Do They Fear Us?, featuring Yolanda Lear from the Broken Record album The Architecture of Oppression, Volume 2. Our associate producer is DJ Jeannie Hopper. Editing is done by Jeremiah Cothran. Music is by J. Rodriguez Sierra. Our band book comments came from Jackie Goldberg, and the band book theme is by DJ Jeannie Hopper with the voice and words of Yvette Murray. Thanks as always to Davian Dial for introducing Listen and Be Heard to the broadcast airwaves on WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. We are also heard weekly on KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas, KHOI in Ames, Iowa, and at WLBH.org in Greenville, South Carolina. I want to thank you for listening and for the opportunity to be heard.
Living it, giving it, having it, taking it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it, living it,